The earth of Burkina Faso is red. It is the color of a setting sun, the color of a heartbeat, and for too long, it has been the color of a silent, open wound. Underneath this crimson dust lies a fortune that could turn a desert into a garden. Gold. Tens of thousands of ounces buried deep within the ancestral soil. Yet, for decades, the children of the Sahel walked over their own wealth with bare feet and empty pockets. 100 tons of gold leave this nation every single year. But until recently, only 10% of that glory stayed at home. 90% crossed the vast oceans to fill the vaults of men who have never felt the scorching heat of the African sun. This is the raw, unvarnished truth of a continent that has been rich on paper but kept poor by the very laws designed to protect it. In 2019, a pen moved across a piece of paper in a quiet room, far from the dust and the sweat of the mines. It was a contract, a legal chain. It bound the Kiaka gold mine, one of the largest deposits in West Africa, to foreign interests, promising the Burkinabe people a mere 10% crumb from the feast being prepared in their own kitchen. To the world, this was stable investment. To the people of Burkina Faso, it was a slow, legalized robbery of their future. But history has a way of turning when the young refuse to inherit the silences of the old. A new wind is blowing through the Sahel. It is not a gentle breeze. It is a storm of dignity. And at its center stands a man in a red beret, a young captain named Ibrahim Traore, who understands that true independence is not found in the waving of a flag, but in the ledger of a gold mine. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates with your sense of justice, show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription to the Sahel Doctrine. It means more than numbers. It keeps the flame of dignity burning and ensures these narratives of sovereignty reach every corner of the globe. For the elders of the African Diaspora, for those who remember the long walk towards civil rights and the struggle for a seat at the table, what is happening in Ouagadougou feels like a familiar song played on a new drum. It is the sound of breaking resource chains. For too long, the narrative of Africa has been one of aid and charity, a story of a hand reached out in desperation. But Ibrahim Traore is changing the grammar of the continent. He is not asking for a handout. He is asserting a handover. The Kiaka mine was meant to be the crown jewel of West Africa Resources Limited, an Australian mining giant. They had the machines, they had the capital, and they had the old contracts signed by leaders who looked toward Paris and Canberra for approval rather than looking at their own people. In 2024, the silence was shattered. The Burkinabe government passed a new mining law, a decree that sent shockwaves through the boardrooms of Sydney and London. This was the birth of the sovereign gold revolution. This law did not just suggest a fairer share, it mandated it. It raised the state's stake and gave the government the sovereign right to buy back the wealth of its own soil. Ibrahim Traore did not act with the reckless impulse of a dictator, as some Western headlines might suggest. He acted with the cold, calculated precision of a man who knows exactly what his people are owed. He looked at the Kiaka project, a mine projected to produce gold for nearly 2 decades, and he decided that 10% was an insult to the ancestors. The Australian mining company was not prepared for a leader who understood the stock market as well as he understood the battlefield. They expected a leader they could appease with a few million in social corporate responsibility projects. A school here, a well there. Instead, they met a strategist who knew that the true price of the Kiaka mine was measured in the sovereignty of a nation. Traore didn't just demand 40%. He structured a deal to buy it, using the very laws his government had crafted to ensure that Africa's wealth reclamation was not just a slogan, but a legal reality. As the news broke, the Australian stock market reacted with a tremor of fear. Investors, accustomed to the predictable extraction of African wealth, suddenly found themselves facing a new reality. Trading was halted. Panic selling began to brew. The world watched, waiting for the young captain to blink, waiting for the inevitable collapse that follows when a small nation dares to challenge the giants of the West. But Traore remained as still as the red earth itself. He knew that the gold wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in a century, the people of Burkina Faso knew it too. But as the global market scrambled to understand this shift, a deeper question began to emerge. Is this simply a move for more money, or is it the first brick in a new wall of African defiance? Because what Traore has done with the Kiaka mine is not just about gold bars. It is about rewriting the very definition of value in a world that has always undervalued the black man's land. To understand the weight of the present, one must first walk the haunted corridors of the past. In 2019, the air in the capital was thick with the scent of old promises and new betrayals. The Kiaka gold mine was not yet a site of extraction. It was a ghost on a map, a promise of prosperity that the previous administration was all too eager to barter away. At that time, the pen was held by hands that sought the approval of foreign boardrooms rather than the blessing of the Burkina Faso people. They signed a convention that felt like a suicide note for national sovereignty. Under those terms, the government was a mere spectator in its own house, granted a tiny 10% stake as a gift for providing the land, the gold, and the very air the miners breathed. This was the old way, the way of the silent war. It was a system where the owners of the soil were treated like tenants, expected to be grateful for the scraps that fell from the high table of global finance. For decades, this was the standard operating procedure across the Sahel. A contract was not a partnership, it was a cage. The leaders of that era did not see the gold as a ladder for their children. They saw it as a currency for their own comfort. But as the sun set on that old guard, the red earth began to tremble. The people were watching. The diaspora was watching. And in the shadows, a new doctrine was being forged. By the time the year 2024 arrived, the political landscape of Burkina Faso had been scorched clean by the fires of necessity. Ibrahim Traore, the young captain with the eyes of a visionary, knew that he could not simply tear up the old maps without drawing new ones. He understood that breaking resource chains required more than just anger. It required the precision of the law. He did not move with the haste of a man who fears the future, but with the deliberate pace of a man who is building it. Under his leadership, the nation did not just protest the old contracts, it rewrote the very nature of ownership. The mining law of 2024 was the first light of a new dawn. It was a legislative torch held high against the darkness of exploitation. This law did not merely ask for a larger share, it fundamentally altered the DNA of extraction in the Sahel. It raised the automatic government stake from 10% to 15%. But more importantly, it opened a door that had been locked for a century, the right of the state to buy into its own industry. It gave the people the power to become shareholders in their own destiny. This was the birth of Africa's wealth reclamation, a process where the red earth was no longer for sale, but for investment. The Kiaka mine, operated by West Africa Resources Limited, became the testing ground for this new reality. As the project moved toward full-scale production in 2025, the Australian miners found themselves in a world they no longer recognized. The old smiles of the former elite were gone, replaced by the firm, uncompromising gaze of a sovereign state. The company, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, was forced to confront a reality that no spreadsheet could have predicted. The government was moving to increase its stake to 40%, not through a stroke of a pen in a dark room, but through a transparent, high-stakes assertion of national right. The cost was calculated, the terms were set. $175 million. That was the price Ibrahim Traore was willing to pay to secure 25% more of his nation's soul. To the critics in the West, this was a risk. To the people of the Sahel, it was a bargain. Every dollar spent was a seed planted in the soil of independence. The Australian company, caught between the fear of the markets and the reality of the ground, had no choice but to listen. They saw the stock market in Sydney ripple with anxiety. They watched as investors, terrified of nationalization, began to question the stability of the region. But Traore's brilliance lay in his balance. He did not expel the miners. He invited them to be fair. He did not steal the shares. He bought them. He turned a moment of potential conflict into a masterclass in economic diplomacy. By paying for the stake, he ensured that the mine remained profitable, that the investors remained stable, and that the project would continue to pour gold out of the ground in 2026. He showed the world that a young African leader could navigate the complex currents of global finance without losing his way or his dignity. The benefits are already beginning to flow like a river after a long drought. This is not just about the government's bank account. It is about the calloused hands of the workers, the schools that will be built with the dividends, and the clinics that will rise from the dust. But even as the gold bars are poured and the ledgers are balanced, a darker cloud is gathering on the horizon. The global giants do not like to lose their grip, and the investor state is a jealous god. The gold of Kiaka is more than a mineral, it is a pulse. And as that pulse quickens, the world has begun to lean in, ears pressed against the red earth, listening to a rhythm they no longer control. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of global power. This is the pivot. This is the moment where the hunter becomes the guardian and the prey becomes the architect. But before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. You are part of something bigger than a channel. You are part of a community that refuses to let these narratives be written by outsiders. If you want to join that community more deeply, if you want to support the team bringing these stories to life, become a member. Your contribution directly funds better research, deeper investigations, and clearer truth. You are not just supporting the Sahel Doctrine. You are supporting every leader, every nation, and every voice fighting for independence and dignity. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. The reaction from the West was as predictable as it was panicked. In the glass towers of Sydney and the financial hubs of Europe, the word nationalization was whispered like a curse. To the global investor, a sovereign state demanding 40% of its own wealth is a threat to the order. But Ibrahim Traore has a different definition of order. To him, the old order was chaos. A chaos where a nation could bleed gold while its children went without books, where the soil was stripped bare while the state treasury remained a hollow shell. This is the core of the sovereign gold revolution. It is the understanding that a nation cannot defend its borders if it cannot control its basements. The pressure began to mount. Sanctions were threatened, investment ratings were lowered, and the invisible hand of the global market tried to tighten its grip around the throat of the Burkina Faso economy. But the young captain did not flinch. He knew a secret that the old leaders had forgotten. The world needs Africa's resources more than Africa needs the world's approval. He understood that the gold in the ground is the ultimate collateral. It is a shield. It is the fire that keeps the lights on when the rest of the world tries to plunge you into darkness. This is not a journey Burkina Faso walks alone. The heartbeat of Kiaka is echoed in the dusty streets of Bamako and the sun-drenched plains of Niamey. The Alliance of Sahel States, or the AES, has become a collective fist. They are no longer individual fingers to be snapped one by colonial interests. They are a unified force. When Mali recovered $1.2 billion in unpaid mining revenue, it wasn't just a win for Mali. It was a blueprint for the entire region. They are sharing intelligence, sharing laws, and sharing a vision of Africa's wealth reclamation that refuses to be ignored. For the African diaspora, watching from across the Atlantic, this is the manifestation of a dream deferred. It is the sight of a black nation standing on its own 2 feet, looking the giants of industry in the eye and saying, "We will pay for what is ours, but we will no longer give it away for free." It is a masterclass in dignity. Traore's choice to buy the 25% stake for $175 million was a stroke of genius. It silenced the critics who called him a thief, and it emboldened the people who called him a brother. But make no mistake, the investor state does not sleep. While the gold flows and the dividends are promised, the machinery of old power is recalibrating. They are looking for the cracks in the AES. They are waiting for the moment the fire flickers. They are betting on the idea that a young man in a red beret cannot outlast a century of systemic extraction. The choice for the Sahel is now clear. Complete economic independence or a return to the comfortable chains of the past. The air is thick with anticipation. The gold is being poured, the law is being tested, and the eyes of the world are fixed on the red earth. But even as the triumph of Kiaka resonates through the continent, a new shadow is beginning to move. Because when you challenge the masters of the gold, you are not just changing a contract, you are declaring a silent war on a system that has ruled the world for 500 years. And in that war, the price of a mistake is much higher than $175 million. The red dust of the Sahel does not merely coat the boots of the soldiers. It settles into the very pores of the soul. It is a constant reminder of the land, the lineage, and the heavy price of holding both. Ibrahim Traore, the young captain who has become the face of this era, is often seen with that dust on his uniform. At 38, a man in the West might be reaching the peak of a corporate ladder or settling into the comfort of a suburban home. But in Burkina Faso, 38 is the age of a shepherd who must guard his flock against wolves that have been circling for a century. To understand the sovereign gold revolution, one must look beyond the military fatigues and the stern gaze. One must look at the motivation that drives a man to walk into a boardroom of international giants and demand the return of his people's inheritance. This is not about the hunger for power. It is about the hunger for justice. For the African diaspora, for those who have spent decades watching their ancestral homes being treated like a global pantry, the motivation of this young captain is a mirror of their own resilience. He is a product of a system that was designed to fail him, yet he learned to master the very tools, the laws, the ledgers, and the logistics that were once used to exclude him. Traore understands that the greatest battlefield is not a patch of desert, it is the mind of the African child. If that child sees their gold being taken for 10%, they learn that their worth is 10%. If they see it reclaimed at 40%, they learn that their dignity is non-negotiable. Take a second right here to tell us where you are watching from, your city, your country, the soil beneath your feet. The Sahel Doctrine reads every one of your comments with immense gratitude, and we send to each of you a heartfelt wish. May your journey be filled with dignity, hope, and light. This is more than a video. It is a gathering of voices across the globe, a bridge built between the red earth of Africa and the hearts of our brothers and sisters everywhere. Tell us where you stand with us. The system that Traore is dismantling is not just a collection of mining contracts. It is a sprawling, invisible architecture of dependency. To achieve breaking resource chains, he had to bypass the old guard, the gatekeepers, who were more interested in their own offshore accounts than the water pumps in their villages. This is the silent war. It is a war of paperwork, a war of technicalities, and a war of will. He used the mining law of 2024 as a scalpel to cut through the layers of bureaucracy that had protected foreign interests for decades. By doing so, he showed that the law can be a torch as much as a chain. But this path comes with a price that is rarely spoken of in the gleaming offices of international observers. To stand for Africa's wealth reclamation is to place a target on one's back. The price of sovereignty is isolation. It is the threat of sanctions that freeze the lifeblood of trade. It is the shadowy movements of intelligence agencies that prefer a compliant puppet to a defiant patriot. Traore knows that when he sleeps with the weight of 20 million lives in his hands. He knows that every time he speaks of the red earth, he is reminding the world that his land is not for sale, and that is a message the owners of the global order do not want to hear. The strategy of this young captain is one of calculated defiance. He is not seeking to destroy the mining companies, but to domesticate them. He wants them to pay their taxes, hire Burkina Faso engineers, and respect the soil. This is the price the system must pay to continue operating in the new Sahel. It is a shift from exploitation to partnership, and for some, that is a price too high to bear. They would rather see the Sahel in flames than see it in control of its own bank. As the gold from Kiaka begins to fund the schools that have been closed for years due to insecurity, and as the army begins to receive the equipment it needs to push back the encroaching shadows of terror, the reality of this sacrifice becomes clear. Every gram of gold reclaimed is a second of peace bought for a mother in a rural village. Every percentage point gained in a contract is a book in the hand of a student. This is the YouTube-safe reality of a revolution. It is not about the fire of the gun, but the light of the classroom. Yet, as the sun begins to dip below the horizon of this chapter, a new tension is rising. The invisible hand of the market, which Traore so masterfully navigated, is beginning to curl into a fist. Rumors are swirling in the financial capitals of the West. Meetings are being held behind closed doors. The giants of the old world are not used to losing, and they are looking for a way to reclaim what they believe is theirs. The silence in the Sahel is becoming heavy, and the young captain knows that the hardest part of the journey is not winning the gold. It is keeping it. The silence in the Sahel is never truly silent. If you listen closely to the wind sweeping across the savannah, you can hear the echoes of those who came before, the ancestors who guarded this red earth with nothing but their courage. For centuries, the wealth of this land was a curse that invited the predator. But today, that same wealth is becoming a shield. The reclamation of the Kiaka mine is not merely a line item in a government budget. It is a spiritual restoration. It is the moment the resource curse is broken by the hammer of national will. But as we celebrate this victory, we must also acknowledge the scars that remain. The journey of Ibrahim Traore is not a fairy tale. It is a gritty, uphill battle against a global system that was never designed to let a leader like him succeed. The price of this defiance is felt in every corner of the nation. It is felt in the markets where prices fluctuate under the weight of external pressures. and in the quiet rooms where diplomats weigh the cost of independence against the comfort of compliance. There is a lingering regret for the years lost to the silent war, decades where the gold flowed out like water through a sieve, while the people remained parched. We look back at the contracts of the past with a heavy heart, knowing how much of our children's future was bartered away for the fleeting shadows of foreign approval. This regret is not a weakness. It is the fuel for the fire that burns in the heart of the new Sahel. It is the never again that echoes from the streets of Ouagadougou to the diaspora in Harlem and London. Yet, out of this regret, a towering hope is rising, a hope as solid as a bar of unrefined gold. We are witnessing the tangible reality of Africa rising. This is no longer a slogan for glossy magazines. It is the sight of Burkinabe engineers taking their rightful place at the Kiaka site. It is the sound of the drum calling for a new kind of unity, one that transcends borders and unites the African diaspora in a shared mission of dignity. For our elders, those who have spent 50 years or more dreaming of an Africa that stands tall, this moment is a vindication of their life's struggle. It is proof that Black history is not just a record of endurance, but a blueprint for triumph. As we prepare to end, remember, this is not the end of the road, but a seed planted in the soil of your heart. Every story of dignity, every voice of sovereignty, is part of a harvest that lies ahead. If you want to see that harvest grow, subscribe to the Sahel Doctrine. Let this channel be the road we walk together, the light we carry forward. Your subscription is not for us alone. It is for the promise of what is still to come. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey, because the next video will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the world. Do not let this moment pass into silence. Subscribe, and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one. The sun is beginning to crest over the horizon of the Sahel, casting long, golden shadows across a land that is finally learning to own its light. The story of the Kiaka gold mine is a testament to the fact that no chain is too heavy to be broken when a people decide they have walked in shadows for long enough. This journey of breaking resource chains is not a sprint. It is a marathon of the spirit, a relentless pursuit of a world where the red earth nourishes its own. It represents the ultimate manifestation of Africa's wealth reclamation, a process that turns the treasures of the ground into the pillars of a sovereign future. To our brothers and sisters in the African diaspora, know that every step taken in Burkina Faso is a step taken for you. Every time we succeed in breaking resource chains, we are dismantling the global architecture of inequality that has sought to keep us divided and dependent. We stand at the threshold of a new era, where the young captain's vision and the ancestors' prayers meet in a blaze of sovereign glory. The chains are shattered, the drum is beating, the sun is rising, and for the first time in a long time, the gold of the Sahel belongs to the hands that have always held the earth.